sweeping views of Earth from space, oceans crashing against coastlines, dense rainforests, animals roaming across vast plains, close-ups of insects, birds, reptiles, and humans from around the world. Look around you. Every living thing you can see, every tree, flower, bird, fish, and human being, is part of a story billions of years in the making. Our planet is home to an incredible variety of life. Tiny bacteria live in boiling hot springs. Massive whales cross entire oceans. Eagles soar thousands of feet above the ground, while insects thrive in environments that would be deadly to larger creatures. At first glance, these organisms seem completely unrelated. But what if they all shared a common history? What if every living thing on Earth was connected through an ancient family tree stretching back billions of years? This idea lies at the heart of one of the most important scientific theories ever developed: evolution. Evolution is the explanation for how life changes over time. It helps scientists understand why species look the way they do, why organisms are adapted to their environments, and how entirely new species can emerge. Today, evolution forms the foundation of modern biology. It influences medicine, genetics, agriculture, and conservation. Yet, despite its importance, it is also one of the most misunderstood scientific concepts. Some people think evolution claims humans came from modern monkeys. Others believe it is based on guesswork or lacks evidence. In reality, the evidence supporting evolution comes from multiple fields of science, including geology, genetics, paleontology, and ecology. But before we explore that evidence, we need to travel back in time. For most of human history, people had no scientific explanation for the diversity of life. Ancient civilizations developed stories and myths to explain where plants, animals, and humans came from. These stories varied across cultures, but they all reflected the same curiosity. Where did life begin? Why are there so many different species? And how did the world come to look the way it does today? As knowledge grew, philosophers began searching for natural explanations. One of the most influential thinkers was Aristotle, who lived in ancient Greece more than 2,000 years ago. Aristotle carefully observed living organisms and attempted to classify them. While many of his ideas were later proven incorrect, his work encouraged future generations to study nature through observation rather than myth. For centuries, however, most people believed species never changed. A wolf was a wolf. A horse was a horse. A human was a human. Life was thought to be fixed and unchanging. Then explorers began traveling farther than ever before. As ships crossed oceans and reached distant lands, naturalists encountered animals unlike anything they had seen before. New species appeared on isolated islands. Strange plants grew in remote regions. Even more surprising were the fossils hidden within Earth's rocks. Scientists discovered the remains of creatures that no longer existed. Some fossils resembled modern animals, while others looked completely alien. These discoveries raised difficult questions. If species never changed, why had some disappeared? Why did fossilized organisms differ from living ones? And why did similar environments on different continents contain different species? At the same time, geologists were uncovering another revolutionary idea. The Earth was far older than anyone had imagined. Mountains, valleys, and rock formations appeared to have formed through slow processes acting over immense periods of time. The planet was not merely thousands of years old. It was ancient. Today, scientists estimate that Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. That amount of time is almost impossible to imagine. If Earth's history were compressed into a single year, humans would not appear until the final moments of December 31st. Suddenly, scientists realized something important. If the Earth was billions of years old, life had an enormous amount of time to change. Perhaps species were not fixed after all. Perhaps they gradually transformed over countless generations. This possibility would eventually lead to one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs in history. A breakthrough associated with a young naturalist named Charles Darwin. In 1831, Darwin boarded a ship called the HMS Beagle. The voyage would last nearly 5 years, and take him around the world. During his travels, Darwin collected plants, fossils, and animal specimens. He studied geological formations and carefully documented everything he observed. At first, he was simply gathering information, but certain patterns began to emerge. On islands and continents separated by vast distances, he noticed species that looked similar yet possessed important differences. Animals seemed specially adapted to their environments. Birds had different beaks depending on the food they ate. Tortoises varied from island to island. Life appeared to be changing and adapting. Darwin spent years analyzing these observations. Eventually, he developed an idea that would transform science forever. He proposed that species evolve through a process known as natural selection. Individuals with traits that improve survival are more likely to reproduce and pass those traits to future generations. Over time, beneficial characteristics become more common. Given enough time, populations can change dramatically. Entirely new species can emerge. This simple yet powerful concept provided a natural explanation for the diversity of life. It suggested that all living organisms share common ancestors, and that life's incredible variety developed gradually over billions of years. But was Darwin correct? How could scientists test such an extraordinary claim? What evidence supports the theory of evolution? And how do we know that life truly changes over time? In the next chapter, we'll explore Darwin's journey aboard the HMS Beagle and discover how his observations led to one of the most influential scientific theories ever proposed. Old maps unfolding, waves crashing against the hull of a sailing ship, journal pages filled with sketches of animals and plants, a portrait of Charles Darwin fades into view. By the early 1800s, scientists had begun to suspect that the natural world was not as unchanging as once believed. Fossils hinted at lost worlds. Geological discoveries suggested Earth was unimaginably old, yet no one had found a convincing explanation for how species could change over time. That would soon change. In 1831, a 22-year-old English naturalist named Charles Darwin boarded the HMS Beagle. The ship's mission was to survey coastlines and create accurate maps. But for Darwin, the voyage would become a scientific adventure that changed history. For nearly 5 years, the Beagle traveled around the globe. Darwin explored tropical rainforests, climbed mountains, studied rock formations, and collected thousands of specimens. Everywhere he went, he observed the incredible diversity of life. At first, many of his discoveries seemed unrelated. But over time, patterns began to emerge. One of the most important stops on the journey was a remote chain of volcanic islands in the Pacific Ocean, the Galápagos Islands. The islands were isolated from the mainland, yet they were filled with unique forms of life. Darwin noticed that many animals resembled species found in South America, located hundreds of miles away. However, they were not identical. The giant tortoises varied from island to island. Some had dome-shaped shells, while others had longer necks and differently shaped shells that helped them reach higher vegetation. Even more intriguing were the birds. Several species of finches looked similar, but their beaks differed dramatically. Some had thick beaks for cracking seeds. Others had narrow beaks suited for catching insects. A few even used cactus plants as a food source. Why would closely related birds have such different features? Darwin began to suspect that these species shared common ancestors, but had gradually adapted to different environments. This idea challenged the traditional belief that species were fixed and unchanging. After returning to England, Darwin spent years analyzing his observations. He also studied animal breeders. Farmers had long practiced selective breeding. By choosing animals with desirable traits and allowing them to reproduce, breeders could gradually create new varieties of dogs, horses, pigeons, and livestock. Darwin realized that if humans could produce significant changes through selective breeding, perhaps nature could do something similar. But nature had no breeder making decisions. Instead, Darwin proposed a process called natural selection. The concept was surprisingly simple. Every species produces more offspring than can survive. A single fish may lay thousands of eggs. A plant may produce hundreds of seeds. Yet only a fraction reach adulthood. Because resources such as food, water, and shelter are limited, organisms must compete to survive. Within every population, individuals differ slightly from one another. Some variations are beneficial. A bird with a stronger beak may access food more easily. A rabbit with better camouflage may avoid predators. A wolf with greater endurance may catch prey more successfully. These advantages increase the chances of survival and reproduction. Individuals possessing helpful traits are more likely to pass them on to their offspring. Generation after generation, beneficial traits become increasingly common. Meanwhile, less useful traits gradually disappear. Over vast periods of time, small changes accumulate. Populations begin to diverge. Eventually, they may become so different that they form entirely new species. This was Darwin's revolutionary insight. Evolution did not require sudden transformations. It worked through countless small changes occurring over immense spans of time. Natural selection acted like a filter, favoring traits that improved survival and reproduction. To understand this process, imagine a population of beetles. Some are slightly darker than others. If predators can more easily spot the lighter beetles, darker individuals are more likely to survive. Over many generations, the population may gradually become darker. No individual beetle chooses to evolve. The population changes because certain traits are passed on more successfully than others. The same principle applies throughout nature. Every adaptation, from the sharp claws of an eagle to the streamlined body of a dolphin, can be understood through the cumulative effects of natural selection. In 1859, Darwin published his groundbreaking book, On the Origin of Species. The book presented a vast collection of evidence supporting evolution through natural selection. The reaction was immediate. Some scientists were fascinated. Others were skeptical. Many religious and political leaders viewed the ideas as controversial. The suggestion that all species shared common ancestors challenged long-held beliefs about humanity's place in nature. Yet despite the debate, Darwin's theory continued to gain support. Scientists around the world tested his ideas against observations from geology, anatomy, embryology, and the fossil record. Again and again, the evidence pointed in the same direction. Species were not fixed. Life changed over time, and natural selection provided a powerful mechanism explaining how those changes occurred. Still, Darwin faced one major problem. He could explain how traits were favored, but he did not know how traits were inherited. The science of genetics had not yet been discovered. Without understanding inheritance, a crucial piece of the puzzle remained missing. That missing piece would arrive decades later and transform evolutionary biology forever. Scientists would eventually uncover DNA, the genetic code shared by all living organisms. The discovery would provide some of the strongest evidence ever found for evolution and reveal just how deeply connected all life on Earth truly is. In the next chapter, we'll examine the evidence itself, from fossils and anatomy to genetics and DNA, and discover why evolution is considered one of the best supported theories in all of science. Ancient fossils being uncovered from rock layers, scientists working in laboratories, DNA strands rotating in a digital animation, skeletons of different animals displayed side by side. When Charles Darwin first proposed evolution through natural selection, many people asked the same question. Where is the proof? After all, if species change over time, there should be evidence. More than a century and a half later, scientists have discovered not just one line of evidence, but many. Each piece tells part of the story. Together, they create one of the strongest scientific cases ever assembled. Let's begin with fossils. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of ancient organisms. They provide a direct window into Earth's distant past. As scientists examine rock layers, they find a clear pattern. The deeper the layer, the older the fossils. Simple organisms appear in the oldest rocks. More complex forms appear later. This sequence is exactly what we would expect if life evolved gradually over time. The fossil record also contains transitional species, organisms that display characteristics of different groups. One famous example is Archaeopteryx. Discovered in Germany in the 19th century, it possessed features of both dinosaurs and modern birds. It had feathers and wings, yet also retained teeth, claws, and a long bony tail. It appeared to represent a stage between two major groups of animals. Since Darwin's time, many additional transitional fossils have been discovered. Scientists have uncovered ancient whale ancestors with functional legs, helping explain how land mammals evolved into ocean-dwelling giants. They have found fossils documenting the transition from fish to early amphibians. Even human evolution is supported by numerous fossil discoveries, showing gradual changes over millions of years. But fossils are only part of the story. Another powerful source of evidence comes from comparative anatomy. When scientists compare the bodies of different animals, they often discover striking similarities. Consider the forelimbs of humans, bats, whales, and cats. They look very different on the outside and serve different functions. A whale uses its limb as a flipper. A bat uses it as a wing. A cat uses it for walking. Humans use it for grasping and manipulating objects. Yet beneath the surface, the same basic bone structure appears again and again. The arrangement of bones remains remarkably similar despite different uses. These structures suggest inheritance from a common ancestor. Evolution predicts exactly this pattern. Species that share ancestors should retain modified versions of older anatomical features. Scientists have also identified vestigial structures. These are body parts that have lost much or all of their original function. For example, whales possess tiny pelvic bones, even though they no longer walk on land. Some snakes retain remnants of hind limbs. Humans have structures such as wisdom teeth and the tailbone, which reflect our evolutionary history. Such features make sense when viewed as inherited traits from ancestors. Then came one of the greatest scientific discoveries in history: DNA. In the 20th century, scientists uncovered the molecular code responsible for inheritance. Every living organism uses DNA to store genetic information. This discovery transformed biology. It also provided extraordinary evidence for evolution. When scientists compare DNA sequences from different species, they find clear patterns of relatedness. Humans share a large percentage of their DNA with chimpanzees. We also share genes with mice, birds, fish, and even plants. The closer two species are evolutionarily, the more similar their genetic code tends to be. It's exactly what we would expect if all life descended from common ancestors. DNA functions like a biological record book, preserving clues about evolutionary history. Scientists can even use genetic evidence to construct evolutionary family trees. Remarkably, these genetic trees often match conclusions reached through fossils and anatomy. Independent lines of evidence point toward the same explanation. Evolution. Evidence also comes from direct observation. Some people mistakenly believe evolution cannot be observed because it occurs too slowly. In reality, scientists have witnessed evolutionary changes in numerous species. One famous example involves bacteria. When antibiotics are used, most bacteria may be killed. However, a few individuals may possess genetic variations that provide resistance. These survivors reproduce, passing resistance to future generations. Over time, resistant strains become increasingly common. This is evolution occurring before our eyes. Similar patterns have been observed in insects, plants, fish, birds, and many other organisms. Environmental changes create new pressures, and populations respond through natural selection. Perhaps one of the most fascinating examples comes from the Galápagos finches, studied by researchers decades after Darwin's voyage. Scientists observed measurable changes in beak size and shape in response to changing food availability. Natural selection was not merely a historical process. It was happening in real time, As evidence accumulated from fossils, anatomy, genetics, and direct observation, support for evolution became overwhelming. Today, virtually every field of biology relies on evolutionary principles. Evolution helps scientists develop new medicines. It assists conservationists in protecting endangered species. It improves our understanding of diseases, ecosystems, and biodiversity. Yet one area remains especially fascinating. What does evolution reveal about us? How did modern humans emerge? Where do we fit within the larger story of life? And why does the theory of evolution continue to generate debate even today? In our final chapter, we'll explore human evolution, address common misconceptions, and examine what this remarkable scientific theory tells us about our place in the natural world. A sunrise over the African savanna, footprints in the soil, ancient cave paintings, DNA strands fading into a montage of human faces from different cultures, Earth rotating slowly in space. For much of history, humans have asked a simple but profound question. Where do we come from? Evolution provides one of the most complete scientific answers ever developed. And at the center of that answer is us. Humans are not separate from the natural world. We are part of it. To understand how we got here, we must look deep into the past, millions of years into a story written in fossils, genes, and stone. The human evolutionary journey did not begin with modern humans. It began with ancient primates that lived in Africa millions of years ago. Over time, different populations of these primates adapted to changing environments. Some remained in forests, others moved into more open landscapes. Gradually, traits began to change. One of the most significant changes was bipedalism, the ability to walk on two legs. This shift freed the hands for other tasks, carrying objects, making tools, and eventually shaping the environment itself. Fossil evidence shows a long chain of hominin species, each displaying a mixture of primitive and modern traits. Species such as Australopithecus walked upright, but still had small brains. Later species in the genus Homo showed increasing brain size, tool use, and social complexity. Homo habilis crafted some of the earliest known stone tools. Homo erectus used fire and migrated beyond Africa. Homo neanderthalensis lived in Europe and Asia, adapting to cold climates and developing complex behaviors. Finally, Homo sapiens emerged, our own species. But evolution did not stop there. It continues in subtle ways today, shaped by culture, environment, and genetics. Modern humans still carry traces of our evolutionary past in our bodies and DNA. But despite overwhelming scientific evidence, evolution is often misunderstood. One common misconception is that humans evolved from modern monkeys or chimpanzees. This is incorrect. Humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor that lived millions of years ago. We are evolutionary cousins, not direct descendants. Another misconception is that evolution is a linear ladder of progress, with humans at the top. In reality, evolution is a branching tree. Species do not move toward a final, perfect form. They adapt to their environments. Some lineages change dramatically. Others remain relatively stable for millions of years. Another misunderstanding is that evolution is purely random. While genetic mutations occur randomly, natural selection is not random. It consistently favors traits that improve survival and reproduction in a given environment. This combination of variation and selection produces the complexity we see in life today. Evolution also does not explain the origin of life itself. It explains how life changes after it exists. The origin of life, abiogenesis, is a separate scientific field still being studied. Despite misconceptions, the evidence supporting evolution remains strong and consistent across many disciplines. Genetics, fossils, comparative anatomy, and direct observation all point to the same conclusion. Life on Earth shares a common ancestry. But beyond the science, evolution carries a deeper perspective. It reveals that all living things are connected. Every organism is part of a vast, branching family tree stretching back billions of years. The air we breathe, the food we eat, and the ecosystems we depend on are all part of this shared history. Evolution also helps us understand our place in nature, not as separate observers, but as participants in an ongoing process of change. It reminds us that life is dynamic, constantly adapting to new challenges and environments. And it highlights the fragility and resilience of life on Earth. As environments change, species either adapt, migrate, or disappear. This is not a story of progress or perfection. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and continuity. From microscopic organisms billions of years ago to the diversity of life today, evolution tells a single, continuous story. And that story includes us. We are not outside of nature. We are nature, shaped by the same forces that shaped every other living thing. The theory of evolution does not diminish life, it deepens our understanding of it. It does not remove wonder, it replaces mystery with insight. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that even the smallest changes, accumulated over vast spans of time, can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Life is not static. It is always moving, always changing, always evolving.